Hi, I'm Milas. While I was deployed, halfway across the world, dodging mortar fire, my own mother emptied my name from the will. She sold the house I grew up in, and when I asked why, she said, "You gave up your rights the day you left." No call, no warning, just silence and erasure. But what they didn't know, what Grandpa left behind, was buried deeper than their lies. And when I found it, it didn't just rewrite the will, it rewrote everything. Before we dive in, have you ever had to fight for something that was already yours? Leave a comment. I read every one. The Michigan sky was gray when I landed, spitting a cold mist that made the runway shimmer like broken glass. My boots hit the ground, heavy from the sand they carried all the way from Iraq. I'd rehearsed this moment during countless sleepless nights, what it would feel like to come home. But this didn't feel like home. Not even close. There was no one waiting for me, no waving sign, no tight embrace, no proud welcome. Just a voicemail from my mother. "Check the house. The keys are still under the mat." I stood there on the sidewalk of the nearly empty airport terminal for a long time before calling a cab. The driver didn't ask why a soldier in uniform looked like she'd been punched in the soul. I didn't offer an explanation. The ride was silent, except for the steady hum of tires on wet asphalt and the static sound of my heart breaking in slow motion. When we pulled up to the house, her house now, I realized the porch light was burned out. The old swing I'd sat on every summer as a child was gone. The flower bed was overrun with weeds, and when I stepped inside, it hit me like a gut punch. My room wasn't mine anymore, my childhood space, lavender walls, trophies on shelves, photos taped to the mirror, was gutted. In its place was a bland guest room, beige everything. It screamed, "You don't belong here anymore." My military duffel hit the hardwood with a dull thud. Dust still clung to the straps. My skin still carried the scent of desert and diesel fuel. I hadn't even unpacked before I noticed the fireplace. There was something charred in there. I knelt down. The ashes were still warm. A photo frame with melted edges, torn pages from old journals, a singed greeting card with the words, "To my brave girl," barely visible beneath the soot. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even hurt. I was numb. I moved slowly, like I was underwater, and started unpacking my duffel on the kitchen floor. I wasn't even sure why. Habit, maybe. That's when I saw it. A yellow envelope, thick and wrinkled, poking out from a pile of catalogs in the trash bin. I almost didn't pick it up, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the old instinct. Trust your gut. Don't ignore what's out of place. The return address was from the family attorney, dated 5 months ago. I tore it open. Inside was a formal notice. "You are hereby invited to the reading of the last will and testament of Howard J. Ellison." My grandfather. He died while I was stationed near Ramadi. I got the Red Cross call but couldn't fly back in time. I thought the family would wait to settle things until I returned. I thought wrong. There was no mention of my name in the notice, nothing, no line item, no signature, nothing but silence where I should have been. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I didn't cry. I grabbed my keys and drove. It wasn't even 10 minutes before I was parked outside my mother's condo. The lights were on, the blinds were half drawn. I knocked. She opened the door just enough to lean against the frame. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite indifference. "Back already?" she said. I held up the envelope. "You didn't think I'd find this?" She glanced at it and shrugged, unfazed. "I figured by now you'd moved on. That world of yours doesn't exactly scream family values, Malis." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. He was my grandfather. "You chose the military," she said, arms crossed. "You chose the world. You gave up your rights the day you left us." That sentence hit like shrapnel. I had risked my life for strangers, and somehow that made me less worthy to the people who were supposed to love me most. The door clicked shut before I could even breathe. I drove around for nearly an hour, past the old ice cream shop, the church parking lot where I learned to ride my bike, the VA clinic where I used to visit Grandpa. I parked and just sat there. Flashback hit like a tide. He'd been so thin in that hospital bed. His fingers, once strong from years of carpentry, trembled as he gripped my hand. He whispered, "Don't let the loud ones write your story." I hadn't understood then, but now it echoed in my bones. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. When I finally got back to the house, it was close to midnight. I went into the garage, dust thick on every box. I pulled down a plastic tub labeled Milas High School. Inside, nestled between yearbooks and an old lacrosse stick, was a small velvet pouch. I hadn't seen it in years. I opened it. Grandpa's pocket watch. The back was engraved. "The quiet ones remember everything." I slipped the watch into my coat pocket and stepped out into the late morning air. The sky was flat and overcast, but the cold no longer bothered me. Not after everything, not after what I'd just seen. The drive to the diner took longer than it should have. I kept circling blocks, thinking, replaying my mother's voice in my head, "You gave up your rights the day you left." I'd heard gunfire that sounded kinder. By the time I pulled into the gravel parking lot, my fingers were aching from how tight I'd been gripping the steering wheel. Inside, I ordered black coffee to go. The waitress behind the counter, Janine, was older than I remembered, but her eyes lit up. "Well, I'll be Malis Ellison," she said, her voice warm but puzzled. "Didn't think we'd see you again." "I didn't either," I said, managing half a smile. "Just passing through." She handed me the cup. "Still can't believe your mom sold the farm so fast. Thought that land was meant for you." Her words hit harder than she knew. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I opened my laptop. I'd forgotten I even still had access to my old email, the one I used in college, the one Grandpa used to write to. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe something to prove I wasn't crazy. Scrolling through years of junk, I stopped at a single unsent draft, dated just a few weeks before he passed. The subject line, "For when you come back." It wasn't finished, just a few lines typed. "Private account, Traverse Valley Credit Union. Use this when you're ready to start over." I kept it off the books. Below was a partial account number. My heart stuttered. I reread it twice. I called the bank immediately. A soft-spoken woman picked up and asked for my information. When I gave it, there was a pause. "Oh," she said, "it shows here the account was closed recently. Transferred out to a checking account ending in 9042. We had your signed release, of course." I felt my jaw tighten. "I never signed anything." She hesitated. "I can send you a copy, ma'am." "I'd appreciate that." I stared at the windshield for a long moment, then dialed the office of Mr. Delmere, the family's longtime attorney. His secretary tried to shuffle me into next week, but when I mentioned I was in town and had some concerns regarding forged legal documents, the tone changed quickly. By afternoon, I was sitting in a leather chair that felt too small and too slick. The office smelled like old money and lemon polish. Delmere stepped in, thinning gray hair combed so precisely it felt unnatural. "Malis," he said too cheerfully, "I thought you were still overseas." "Apparently not," I said flatly. He tried to make small talk. I cut to it. "I need to see the waiver I supposedly signed for Grandpa's estate." He blinked. "Of course. Though, if I recall correctly, your mother brought it in on your behalf. You'd been unreachable at the time." He walked to a file cabinet, flipped through folders, and pulled one out. "There we are," he said, setting the paper in front of me like a peace offering. It was my name, sure, in handwriting that didn't even try to mimic mine. Perfect cursive. I hadn't written like that since Catholic school. "You believe I signed this?" I asked. "Well, your mother did say—" I looked him straight in the eye. "That's not my handwriting." Delmere's face twitched. "If there's been a mistake?" "I want a certified copy of this form," I interrupted, "and a copy of the will. Unredacted." He nodded slowly. "I'll need a day." "You've got one," I said, standing. He didn't stop me. Maybe he knew better. Maybe he remembered Grandpa's warning to me once in passing. The louder they are, the more they're hiding. Back in my truck, I didn't cry. I didn't scream, but I clenched the steering wheel so hard I thought the leather might tear. I pulled over outside a gas station, pulled out my phone, and called Lacey. She'd served with me, now worked in military legal affairs, JAG Corps. When she picked up, her voice was all business. "I need help," I said. "Tell me everything," she replied. I did. And for the first time since I landed on U.S. soil, I felt like someone was finally on my side. As I drove back into town, I passed the old diner again. Janine was sweeping the front steps. She waved. "You know," she called out, "wasn't the farm supposed to be yours?" The question echoed louder than she meant it to, and something in me clicked into place. The waitress's words trailed behind me like smoke as I stepped back into my truck. I didn't even start the engine for a full minute, just sat there, gripping the wheel, my knuckles pale. The waiver form was still on the seat beside me, creased from how tightly I'd been holding it. I didn't need directions. I could drive to the farm with my eyes closed. The road out to the old place was lined with cottonwoods, their leaves trembling even though the air was still. I hadn't been back since before I deployed, but every turn, every mailbox, every sagging fence post still lived in muscle memory. But when I pulled up to the driveway, something hit me in the chest like a quiet punch. The mailbox no longer read Ellison. It read Bryn Esme Ward. I stayed in the truck, letting that sink in. I knew Bryn had always resented that Grandpa and I were close. She called me the favorite with boots. But this wasn't resentment. This was replacement. I stepped out slowly. The driveway gravel had been freshly raked. No tire grooves, no weeds. The porch was newly painted in a soft sage green, the kind of color my sister always said made a house look like a Pinterest post. The farmhouse looked staged, like a catalog version of itself. Everything neat, empty, too perfect. Near the mailbox, half tucked behind the tall grass, was a discreet wooden post with a plastic frame clipped on. I bent down. Inside, a real estate flyer. Tucked in the corner, a QR code. I scanned it with my phone. The listing popped up immediately. Charming, historic 4-bedroom farmhouse with upgraded fixtures and wraparound porch. Owned by Ms. Bryn E. Ward. Perfect for multi-generational living. I read it twice, then a third time. The blood drained from my face. That house, this house, was never meant for her. My grandfather told me 100 times in quiet moments over coffee or late nights by the fire, "This land is yours when you come home." I put it in writing. My fingers were cold, not from the weather, but from what this meant. They didn't forget me. They erased me. I walked along the edge of the property, my boots crunching the gravel path that used to lead to the barn. The wind had picked up. It pushed against me as if it didn't want me here. I tried the front door. Locked. So I circled around back. The window next to the kitchen sink, the one Grandpa always opened in summer, was shut, but the curtains were sheer enough to let me see inside, and what I saw made me take a step back. The living room was curated, like a shrine, but not to him. Framed photos covered the mantel and hallway wall. Bryn at her college graduation. Bryn holding a wine glass with Mom at some vineyard. Even a shot of her with her new husband, third one if I was counting right, cutting a ribbon in front of some charity event. Not one picture of me, not the one of Grandpa pinning my ROTC badge, not the one of us riding the old mare down by the creek when I was 11. Not even the crooked kindergarten portrait he kept on his desk for 20 years. Gone. His favorite recliner, replaced with a gray sectional that looked like it belonged in a department store. And the weather vane? I glanced up at the barn roof. Empty. The bronze horse that spun wild in every winter storm, the one Grandpa said ran harder than any stallion ever bred, was gone. Inside, it looked like I'd never been born. I stood frozen at the window for a moment too long. A neighbor's car passed down the road, and I instinctively stepped back, swallowing the lump that had risen in my throat. This wasn't just loss. This was erasure. I pulled out my phone and took photos, lots of them. The mailbox, the real estate flyer, the listing, the name on the deed. I backed away from the window slowly, like I was leaving a crime scene, because in a way, I was. I drove a few minutes up the road and parked by the old cemetery. There was a bench near the corner under the tree line, where Grandpa used to sit and talk to no one in particular. I sat there now, fingers trembling, trying to process it all. A memory broke through like a hammer. Grandpa one winter, wrapped in his old flannel, poking the fire with an iron rod. "I told your mother," he said. "You'll always have a place to come back to. That house is for you. It's already in the papers. Doesn't matter what noise they make later. You're my quiet one, the one who listens." I hadn't listened. I had trusted. I had assumed people would honor their word. I was wrong. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle. Then I whispered it out loud, just for me. If they erased me, I'll show them I was never invisible. I spent the whole night hunched over the kitchen table, my laptop glowing, papers spread out like a crime scene. I hadn't eaten. The only sound was the occasional groan from the old refrigerator and the scratching of my pen across legal pads. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was evidence. At 3:14 a.m., I found it. In the county's digital land record archives, after hours of scrolling and filtering through deeds and transactions, there it was. Transfer 2107-8-22. Milas Ward, Bryn E. Ward, dated exactly 7 months earlier, while I was 6,300 miles away, training in an unshaded desert and dodging IEDs. The scan loaded. I stared at the screen. There was my name, only it wasn't my writing. The M curled like a little ballerina. Mine always leaned left. The D was open at the top like a careless child's. I hadn't signed it. I knew it. And yet, there it was. Black ink. On file. Legal. I sat back slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. Somewhere down the hallway, a neighbor's porch light flicked on, probably letting out their dog. But all I could think about was how I'd been legally erased, with a pen. I called the county clerk's office first thing that morning, right when the line opened. I tried to sound casual. "Hi, I was reviewing a property deed, transfer 27-8-22. Just trying to verify the notary on that." The woman on the line hummed, typing. "Yes, looks like that was notarized by Kent Aldridge," she said. "Everything was submitted properly." My throat tightened. Kent Aldridge. He wasn't just any notary. He was my uncle's high school buddy. They'd hosted poker night every third Thursday since '92. I'd served them ginger ale as a kid. I ended the call politely and sat there for a minute, the phone still pressed to my cheek. They didn't just steal, they planned it. Every name involved was a hand in the pot, and I'd never been dealt in. By noon, I was parked in front of my mother's condo. Not the farmhouse. She'd left that behind the minute Bryn rebranded it. The front door opened before I even knocked. She knew I'd come. "Milas," she said coolly. "Didn't expect you today." "I'm sure you didn't." I held up the printed transfer. "I guess you thought I wouldn't find this." She didn't even glance at the paper. "I thought you were smarter than this," she muttered, dragging family through the mud because of some piece of dirt. Behind her, I spotted Bryn, arms folded like she was waiting for a show. "That piece of dirt was promised to me. You know that." "Promised by a senile old man," my mother snapped. "He said things when he was dying. That doesn't make them binding." I stepped forward. "That's not what this says. It says I signed it over, while I was deployed." Bryn raised an eyebrow. "We needed the house, Milas. You're not even part of this family anymore. You don't call. You don't visit. You don't have a husband or kids. You don't need it." My mouth went dry. "You needed it? Or you wanted it?" She smirked. "Same difference, sweetheart." My mother let out a sigh, like she was exhausted by my very presence. "You made your choice. You left. You enlisted. You gave up the right to decide anything here." I took a slow breath, measured. "So signing my name without my consent? That was your way of making things fair?" "No," she said. "It was our way of making things final." Her words echoed in my ears. Final. That word did something. Not the kind of pain that breaks you, but the kind that burns everything soft and leaves you sharp. I scanned the living room behind them. Clean. Coordinated. Sterile. My high school diploma. Gone. The photo from boot camp. Gone. Even the quilt my grandmother made, replaced with something pastel and impersonal from a catalog. Then I heard a voice from down the hallway. "Mom? Who's that lady?" A boy. Probably Bryn's kid. The one I'd sent birthday cards to for 6 years. The one who used to call me Sergeant Auntie. I turned toward the sound. "I'm your aunt," I said gently. He looked confused. "I don't remember you." Of course he didn't. My mother didn't flinch. "Time moves on," she said. "Some people stay gone so long, the rest of us, we just adapt." I stood there a moment longer, letting the silence stretch between us. They didn't regret it, not a second of it. I stepped back from the door. "This isn't over," I said calmly. Bryn rolled her eyes. "You always did like the drama." "No," I replied. "I just like the truth." I walked away without slamming the door, without looking back, without raising my voice. But when I got in my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. And that was the moment I knew I wasn't going to ask. I was going to take back what was mine. The next morning, I didn't bother with breakfast. I didn't even change out of the old sweatshirt I'd slept in. My mind was clear, but my body moved on instinct. There was only one place I needed to be, back at the farm. It was early, too early for anyone to notice. The light hadn't fully shifted yet, casting a gray hush over the gravel road as I turned into the long driveway. I parked by the edge of the barn, far enough from the house to avoid drawing eyes from the kitchen window. Bryn had been careful to repaint the porch and restage the home, but she hadn't touched the barn. That told me everything I needed to know. The barn had always been Grandpa's sanctuary, and mine by proxy. Every holiday I'd sneak out here to escape the noise. He'd hand me a root beer, talk about the war, about honor, about silence. It smelled the same. Hay dust, old oil, wood warmed by time. I pulled open the creaking side door and climbed the loft ladder slowly, feeling every rung in my knees. When I reached the attic, the air grew colder, still. Cobwebs clung to rafters. Shafts of light slipped in through the slats in the roof. There, against the back wall, stacked like forgotten relics, were the old boxes Grandpa had labeled with his scrawled Sharpie writing. Some said tools, others tackle. One box, smaller than the rest, had my name on it in thick black marker, Malis, private. My breath caught. I crouched and peeled back the brittle masking tape, careful not to tear it. Inside were my childhood drawings, faded Polaroids of me with missing front teeth, a folded American flag from my commissioning ceremony, and one envelope, cream-colored, sealed, my name on the front in Grandpa's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. My hands rested on the flap, still. Something about that letter. It felt heavier than paper. Like truth was folded between every line. I sat down on a splintered wooden bench and peeled it open slowly. "Malis, if you're reading this, it means they didn't tell you the truth. I'm sorry. I tried to make sure you'd be protected, but I feared this might happen. Your mother, she was never comfortable with my choices. Contact Theodore Langston. He has what's rightfully yours. Don't let silence bury you." Tears didn't come. I was past tears. Instead, I stood, letter in hand, and marched back to my truck. 2 hours later, I pulled into a quiet cul-de-sac just outside Asheville. A weathered sign read, "Langston and Westmoreland, legal counsel since 1954. Inside, it smelled of leather and lemon oil. An older man behind a cherry desk looked up from his glasses. His silver hair curled slightly over his collar. "You must be Malis," he said, standing. I handed him the letter without a word. He read it silently, his lips tightening with every line. Then, slowly, he pushed back his chair, stood, and unlocked a drawer behind him. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick and creased at the corners. "I never filed this," he said quietly. "Your grandfather left 2 wills. This one was intended to be the final." He opened the envelope and laid the contents on the table between us. I scanned the text. Everything. The farmhouse, the land, the workshop out back. It was all assigned solely to me. Bryn? A small trust fund, conditional, and then this line. Only Melis knows the value of service and sacrifice. This land belongs to her. My stomach turned. How did this not go through probate? I asked. Langston sighed. Your mother requested a summary probate proceeding. The original was filed by another attorney, one I didn't know. I assumed they were working with your approval. They weren't? Then someone must have intercepted this before it could be registered with the court. It never got entered. My voice was low, steady. Can it still be enforced? He nodded slowly. There's a legal path to contest the current probate. It won't be easy, it'll be public. But yes, it can be challenged. We sat in silence a moment longer. Before I left, he slid me a copy of the will and a stapled packet titled Filing Instructions, NC Probate Contest. As I drove back toward the motel, a memory played in my mind like an old reel. I was 14, wearing Grandpa's too large flannel shirt, holding the gate steady as he bolted it to the post. He'd looked at me with that quiet pride and said, "You're my anchor, Melis. When I'm gone, you'll keep the line steady." Back then, I hadn't understood what that meant. Now I did. Back then, I thought I'd always be welcomed home. Now I knew better. But I also knew this. I didn't go to war to fight my family, but I'd do it if I had to. So I did. It was just past 10 a.m. when I walked into the Buncombe County Courthouse, clutching the folder Theodore had prepared. The building smelled like wood polish and bureaucracy, all stiff backs and slow-moving lines. My boots clicked louder than they needed to on the marble floor, drawing a few glances. I didn't care. At the clerk's desk, I laid the petition down with both hands. My voice didn't tremble. I'm here to file a motion to reopen probate under Section 3127, based on newly discovered material will. The clerk, a woman maybe in her early 60s with silver bangs and bright pink lipstick, looked up at me with a nod that held no surprise. "We've been expecting this," she said quietly. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She slid me a receipt and leaned in just slightly. "Someone leaked the estate. Press called this morning." By the time I stepped back onto the courthouse steps, a small knot of camera crews had already gathered, their long lenses pointed like rifles. A woman in a navy blazer with a mic caught my eye. "Melis Ward?" she called. "Veteran? Can you comment on the challenge to your family's estate?" I didn't stop walking. "Not yet," I said, voice low but firm. "But you'll hear from me soon." By noon, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Some calls were from numbers I didn't recognize, others were from battle buddies, men and women I'd trained with, deployed with, buried friends with. "Damn right, Melis," one text read. "Don't let him steal from you, or from him." Bryn, on the other hand, went quiet. She blocked me on every app, Instagram, Facebook, even Venmo. I checked our mom's page and found all the old family photos suddenly gone. Our trip to Shenandoah? Deleted. Christmas mornings? Erased. By that evening, she was no longer silent. A charity gala was taking place in downtown Asheville, Bryn's turf. Her gold-rimmed smile flashed behind a podium on a local live stream, her hands folded like a senator in training. "I just want to say," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "that it's heartbreaking when people take advantage of a grieving family, especially when they manipulate a dying old man. For money." The camera zoomed in slightly. Some people serve their country and others serve themselves. Applause followed. Some people actually clapped. I watched from my motel room, sitting at the edge of the bed, legs bouncing like a child waiting to be scolded. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but I didn't. Instead, I turned it off. The motel fan spun overhead like it was mocking me, blades circling something I couldn't quite reach. I sat in the quiet until it wasn't quiet anymore. At 2:14 a.m., my phone lit up. Anonymous email. Subject, "You deserve to know." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the touchpad. My pulse kicked up. Not fast, just sharp. I tapped it open. One audio file. No text, just the title. They knew. I pressed play. A voice crackled through, unmistakable even through the distortion. My mother. If she ever finds that letter, we burn it, she said like she was talking about junk mail. She left. She doesn't get to come back and play saint. Another voice followed. Bryn. We'll just say he was confused, PTSD or whatever. People eat that up. They laughed. Laughed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My body just stopped. It wasn't about the land anymore, or the farmhouse, or the signature they forged. It was about the look in my grandfather's eyes when he saluted me before I left for my first tour. It was about the flag I folded after his funeral. It was about loyalty and silence, and how some people take your absence as an excuse to rewrite your story. The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the bed beside me. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I stood in front of the mirror above the sink. My reflection stared back, drawn face, tired eyes, jaw locked so tight it hurt. They'd erased my photos. They'd twisted my service into selfishness. They'd mocked the one man who believed in me. But now I had something they didn't see coming. Not tears, not rage, not another please. I had evidence, and I wasn't going to respond with words. I had something better. 2 mornings later, I sat across from Langston in his office, the audio file open on his computer, speakers muted. The only sound was the quiet scrape of his pen as he filled out the supplemental motion form page by page. This, he murmured without looking up, is going to rattle some very heavy cages. We filed the motion by noon. Attached were the grandfather's sealed will, Doris Maher's notarized statement, and the damning recording. By 3 p.m., the court issued an emergency hearing notice. Fraud allegations serious enough to warrant immediate review. It would take place in less than 48 hours. The courthouse was different this time. Yeah, there were more reporters, more murmurs, a heavier silence in the hallway as people passed me by, some with nods of support, others with curious glances like I was a headline unfolding in real time. Inside the courtroom, it felt cold, not the air, the energy. Bryn sat at the far end with our mother beside her, both dressed like widows, muted colors, somber faces, perfect pearls. They didn't look at me. The judge entered, and we all stood. Langston rose when addressed and stated our intent clearly, calmly, professionally. We are filing for the suspension and overturning of the prior probate ruling on the grounds of newly discovered evidence, both material and testimonial. Then he played the recording. The courtroom held its breath. My mother's voice spilled into the air, sharp and deliberate. If she ever finds that letter, we burn it. She left. She doesn't get to come back and play saint. Bryn followed like a dagger behind her. We'll just say he was confused, PTSD or whatever. A few gasps. The judge blinked slowly. His pen stopped moving. Bryn didn't flinch, but she didn't look at me either. My mother, though, her expression barely shifted. A curl of the lip, a flicker of a smirk, like a dare. The opposing attorney stood. His voice was brisk. Your Honor, we contest the authenticity of that recording. There is no forensic validation. It could easily have been synthesized, spliced, manipulated. Then came the performance. My mother took the stand, calm and composed like she was delivering Sunday scripture. My daughter, she began, always had a talent for exaggeration. She was dramatic as a child. It's heartbreaking what bitterness does to memory. She looked straight at the judge. That's not my voice. I never said those words. Bryn's arms stayed crossed the entire time. Her chin was slightly lifted, like she was watching a dog bark at a parade. I said nothing, because I didn't have to. Not yet. Just as the judge shifted to conclude the session, before he could speak, a faint creak echoed from the back of the room. The door opened. The clerk looked up. Ma'am, this is a sealed— It's okay, Langston said softly, standing. A wheelchair appeared in the doorway, pushed slowly by a man in hospital scrubs. Doris Maher. Her skin was translucent with illness, but her eyes still burned with clarity. She coughed once, steadied her breath, and said, I'm Doris. I witnessed the signing. I have the original will, and I've been afraid far too long. In her lap was a leather-bound folder. She opened it slowly, hands trembling, and removed a sealed envelope. I was there when Mr. Ward signed this. With me, no pressure, no family in the room. He asked me to hold it, in case something ever felt wrong. Gasps echoed around the room like echoes off granite. Even the judge froze for a second. The attorney beside my mother turned red, almost visibly sweating. Bryn's face dropped color like a flicked switch. Langston stepped forward, took the envelope carefully, and handed it to the court clerk. "This is the original will," he said. "We request immediate review and suspension of the previous ruling." The judge rubbed his temples, then looked at my mother, then at me. My mother was gripping the bench so tightly her knuckles were pale. Bryn looked at her with wide eyes, as if for the first time unsure who was really in charge. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Vindication doesn't need applause, just light. And this truth, no matter how long they buried it, had just clawed its way back to the surface. They thought the will was buried forever, but truth has a way of clawing its way back. The courthouse reopened on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of sky that pressed down on your chest. I arrived early, stood across the street, watching reporters adjust their collars and cameramen set their angles. I didn't walk in until the last possible minute. I didn't want to be a spectacle. I just wanted to breathe. Inside, the judge looked exhausted but focused. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and said, "This court has reviewed the evidence provided, including the audio file, the testimony of Ms. Meyer, and the notarized documents now entered into record." A silence filled the room. A real one. Thick. Unspoken. He continued, measured and unwavering. "It is the ruling of this court that the last valid will of Walter Rourke be recognized and enforced. Accordingly, the entirety of the estate, including the property located at 214 Briarwood Hollow, is awarded to Melis Rourke. The probate ruling filed previously is vacated." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt my lungs expand for the first time in what felt like years. Behind me, someone shifted. A sniffle, maybe. A camera shutter clicked once, and then came the scream. "No!" Bryn jumped to her feet like someone had pulled a trigger in her spine. Her voice cracked as she pointed straight at me. "You don't deserve it! You were gone! You left! He was confused and old and you knew it! You manipulated him!" The bailiff was already moving. Another officer came from the side. Bryn pushed at them as they approached, her sobs turning into sharp, guttural yells. "It was always supposed to be mine. I was the one here. I was the one who stayed." Her words twisted in the air, pathetic and furious, and so loud they scraped the walls. I sat still. I didn't meet her eyes, because the moment I gave her my rage, I'd lose everything I just reclaimed. Let her scream. Let them all hear what I've been hearing in my head for years. When the courtroom cleared, I stood outside beneath the courthouse steps. The air was still biting, but I barely noticed. That's when I saw her. My mother. She walked straight toward me, heels sharp against concrete, her face calm in that performative way she always wore when she wanted something. "Melis," she said, voice low but firm. "We don't have to drag this out. I'll make a statement. Public apology. Call it a misunderstanding. You don't need to make us look like villains." I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as a daughter, not even as an opponent, as a woman who had lived her entire life rewriting the truth in her favor. I answered without raising my voice. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to breathe. I turned. Her voice didn't follow. Outside the courthouse, as I reached into my coat pocket for my keys, my fingers brushed the old pin. The brass was warm from my body heat, smooth from decades of wear. I unpinned it, held it flat in my palm. The eagle, the flag, the crossed swords, still intact, still mine. He had given it to me 1 week before he passed. "You earned this," he'd said, pinning it gently inside my collar, "and you never have to prove it." All this time they tried to convince me I didn't belong. But this was proof that I did. Not because I shouted louder, but because I never stopped remembering. The courthouse doors creaked behind me. Reporters buzzed. I didn't stop to answer. I'd already said everything I needed to say. Everyone got what they wanted, except for peace. It was nearly dusk when I pulled off the narrow gravel road and rolled to a stop in front of the farmhouse. The tires crunched softly beneath the weight of memory. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, watching the golden light stretch across the brittle grass. No cameras, no reporters, no voices, just wind through dry fields and the groan of old wood settling. The screen door creaked as I opened it, just like it used to. The front steps were chipped but familiar. I stepped inside, boots tapping against the warped floorboards. It smelled like cedar and dust. The walls still held the warmth of summers long gone, and the corners remembered every secret I'd whispered into them as a child. This house was mine now, on paper, legally, undeniably. But possession didn't feel like victory. It felt quiet, like the house had been waiting. The living room was empty, but I could still see Grandpa's chair in my mind, right where it used to sit, near the fireplace, under the lamp with the stained glass shade. I ran my fingers along the edge of the window frame, brushing away a cobweb. The silence wasn't hollow, it was whole. I moved upstairs slowly, checking each room, noting what needed repair, what could wait. My old bedroom had been turned into a storage space. No more posters, no childhood books, just paint cans and broken curtain rods. Down the hallway, in the den where Grandpa kept his fishing poles and faded maps, I paused. A photo on the wall caught my eye. Us on Lake Higgins, a fat bass in my hands and him grinning like a proud fool behind me. I smiled, reached to straighten the frame. It wobbled. Something was stuck behind it. I slid my fingers behind the wood, gently prying it away from the wall. A yellowed envelope fluttered to the floor. Written across the front, in familiar scrawl, "For Melis, only if they try to take it from you." I knelt slowly, heart thudding. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside, a single page. "If you're reading this, sweetheart, it means they tried. I prayed they wouldn't. I hoped they'd remember what love looks like. But if they didn't, know this. You were always the one with the softest heart. That's why I left it to you. Not because of your medals, not because you served, but because of the way you never let the world harden you. You carried your burden quietly. You showed up for people even when they didn't deserve it. And that's worth more than all the land in Michigan. Don't ever let them convince you you're small. You're not. Love you forever, Grandpa." The tears came before I could stop them, hot, heavy, cleansing. I sat there, knees tucked to my chest, the letter pressed to my heart like it might anchor me in place. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I didn't cry when Bryn screamed, or when my mother tried to bargain dignity like it was a coupon at the grocery store. But here, with the echo of his voice between these walls, I let it all go. Later that evening, I walked through the backyard, the fields stretching out like a promise. The barn leaned slightly to the left, same as always. I made a mental note to reinforce the beams, fix the fence line, maybe plant something next season. I wasn't going to sell, not because I needed the land, but because this place was the one patch of earth where I'd never been somebody's shadow. As the sun dipped below the trees, I stepped onto the porch and leaned against the railing, letting the air settle around me. Inside my coat, the army pin brushed against my side. I unfastened it and held it up to the fading light. "You earned this." That's what he told me. And for the first time, I truly believed it. This wasn't just a homecoming. It was a beginning. I'm not who I was when I left. But maybe that's the point. Some inherit money. Some inherit pain. I inherited the truth, and that changed everything. Have you ever had to fight for something that was already yours? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.